The Gulf South Conference is the premier football conference of Division II. It's the home of 11 football national championships and 5 Harlan Hill Trophy winners. Now, bringing you in-depth coverage and pinpoint analysis every week with the GSC Football Weekly podcast, here are your hosts, Matt Zaleski and Mike Ezekiel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into the Gulf South Conference Weekly Football Podcast. Only one GSC team left, but we are into the Final Four of the semifinals. Matt Zaleski here coming to you from the Fox Sports Show studio. Alongside me, as always, Mike Ezekiel and our producer, Will Corey, hanging out in the back. Mike, good afternoon, man. How are you?
Good. How are you, Matt?
Hey, I'm excited for some semifinal football, Mike. We've got one conference team left, UNA, and they're going to go on the road and face Shepherd. And then the other one is probably the big favorites, Northwest Missouri. They're going to host a very good Ferris State team coming off a big win over Grand Valley. So things are really starting to heat up, and I'm excited for this coming week.
Oh, it's going to be a very fun semifinal weekend. Both games, this is the first time all year that we get to see the 4 best teams left in Division II. One game being played at 11, 11 Central Time, that is. We are in Central Time Zone here. And then 3 o'clock Central, the second game. So, you can go from watching one game to watching the next, so you get to see everybody play. That's my favorite part of the whole deal, but, man, this is going to be great. Seeing 4 great teams left, Super Region champions going at it for a chance to play in the national championship. The stakes do not get any higher than that. It's going to be a really fun weekend.
Yeah, it really will be. And Mike, this is the first year that the NCAA decided to reseed the 4 teams that made the semifinals, opposed to having crossover regions where, one year one may play 4, 2 may play 3 as far as the regions, and then 2 plays 4 and 1 plays 3. And so you cross it over. They kind of ex-nayed that and said, hey, we're going to get the final 4 teams and we're going to seed those teams in order of how, in order of what we think that they're worth, I guess I'm I'm butchering this right now, but how we think they should be seeded. And for UNA fans, some are a little disappointed because they were a number 1 seed in their region. Shepherd was a number 3 seed in their region, but yet Shepherd got the number 2 overall seed, and UNA was 3rd. Some of my thoughts there was UNA did have 1 loss. Now, granted, it was to Jacksonville State, who's an FCS team, so that was really not held against them because it wasn't a Division II opponent. But UNA also had a game cancel against Florida Tech, who was probably going to be one of their tougher opponents on the schedule, and they were going to travel down and play that game. They didn't end up playing that game, and even though Shepherd was the 3 seed, Mike, they were undefeated. They happened to play in a region where there was multiple undefeated teams, and they got the 3 seed. So at the end of the day, it's tough when you feel like, hey, we're a 1 seed in our region, they're a 3 seed in their region, but yet when we all get reseeded, they're higher. But if you dig deeper, like I just did there for a moment, I think the NCAA got it right. Now, if they would have had UNA as the 2 and Shepherd as the 3, obviously I don't think there's an argument there really for a heavy argument for Shepherd, but I don't think there's a heavy argument for UNA. That was tough. I think Ferris State, with their 2 losses, was clearly the number 4 seed in Northwest, being dominant, the defending national champions, undefeated, continued their dominance in the playoffs. I think they were the unquestioned number 1 seed. So firmly got those right, but I personally think that this worked out the way it should have been. Even though I'd rather UNA be at Brawley Stadium and play here in Florence and play at home, I do think they got it right.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of an unpopular opinion here in Florence, but I also believe they got it right. Talking to a lot of the people that I've talked to, some of them have said, they thought UNA might have got screwed a little bit, or just kind of hated that UNA wasn't going to be playing at home, felt like they deserved it. And, I kind of had to present the facts that, you throw out seedings. You talked about Shepherd being a 3 seed in their region, UNA being a 1 seed. I think when you get to this point in the season, you have to throw out those seeds because it doesn't really matter at that point. You have to look at resumes. I think Shepherd has a slightly better resume than UNA. They've beaten 2 undefeated teams in a row. They've beaten 3 this year. UNA hasn't really beaten any undefeated teams from that perspective. I think not playing Florida Tech might have hurt a little bit because they didn't play as many games. Shepherd's played 13, so they've proven that they can win games. Stat-wise, everything looks pretty even on paper. But I think UNA's path of least resistance, so to speak, playing a 5 and 6 seed, Super Region 2 being a little bit down this year, possibly the weakest region in Division 2 this year. That might be the first time I've seen that in a while. Usually Super Region 1's a little weaker, but I think Super Region 2 is probably the weakest region this year. I think that might have played a factor in why they voted it that way, and just the way that Shepherd's played undefeated teams, I think they really deserve to host. And Again, I think it could have went either way. I think UNA had a case. I think beating North Greenville 38-0 was something that could have helped them if in that regard. But at the end of the day, I think they got it right, having Shepherd as the home team.
Yeah, and Mike, as you mentioned, we know the two teams we beat in the region were 5 and 6 seeds. The number 2 seed, Newberry, was without their quarterback. He was suspended or injured. He may have been injured.
I don't know for sure, but I think it could have been suspended.
Sure, I don't remember either, but obviously he was a big reason they were as good as they were. They won the SAC conference, and he was unavailable, and so they lost to Tuskegee in a game we probably thought they would have won if he was able to play. And then Florida Tech, who had a great season as well, their quarterback was suspended, and that was kind of a wild situation. We're not going to dive back into that. So he didn't play either. And I think either one of those teams could have been a more formidable challenge for UNA, and I think one of those two teams would have ultimately at least gotten to the quarterfinals last week. So UNA probably had the path of least resistance. And as you made mention, Mike, when you look at Shepherd, they beat the 1 seed in the region who was an undefeated team in California, PA, this past week. And before that, they beat LIU Post, who was also an undefeated team who was the 2 seed. They won that game by 19 points over LIU Post, and they came from 10 points down to beat California on the road this week by 11. So they've had to go on the road the last 2 weeks. They're kind of getting rewarded to be back at home. The more I even think about it and talk about it right now, the more it makes sense to me that they are the home team. So UNA will play Shepherd. Folks, just in case you don't know, Shepherd was the runner-up last year as they came up quite a bit short, 34-7 to Northwest Missouri State in their bid for a national championship. They're hungry to try to get back there. And for UNA, they haven't been to a national championship since they won it back in 1995. They have had a handful of semifinal appearances, but yet have come up short a few times there. And a lot of those times, I know in 2005, they came up short to Northwest Missouri State. In 2008, they came up short to Northwest Missouri State, both of these in the semifinals. Now, I'm not going to guarantee Northwest is going to be Ferris, but UNA wants to get back and try their hand with Northwest Missouri one more time. And for Shepherd, losing last year in the championship game to Northwest Missouri, they'd like to get back there too. And we both overwhelmingly feel that Northwest Missouri has a great chance to be back in that game, Mike. And UNA and Shepherd both have good reason to want to get there and face them.
Absolutely, and I think that UNA-Shepherd matchup is going to be a pretty close game. At least it appears that way on paper. I looked at the Massey ratings today. I figured you'd be intrigued by that. Northwest Missouri is a 98% favorite over Ferris. That's
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yes, very, very big number. Now UNA and Shepherd, UNA is a 61% favorite, and I think their prediction's 27-24. So that's a pretty close game.
Yeah.
And it seems like a coin toss to me. Could really go either way. I think North Alabama does have the slight edge, so, I agree with the ratings there. We'll see what Ferris does. I don't think you can completely rule them out. They beat a good Grand Valley team last week. They're coming in hot. They've won a lot of games in a row. I think their last loss might have been to Grand Valley. So, that's, big for them to kind of get on this hot streak and get back to playing Northwest Missouri State. It's going to be their biggest challenge, and they're going to try to want to be there. But Northwest, they know how to win. They've done it before. They're the defending national champion. Haven't lost since 2014 in the first round of the playoffs to Duluth. I think that was their last loss. So they know how to win, and they've beaten good teams. So they're going to be ready to play and ready to get back to the national championship. For UNA and Shepherd, Shepherd's been there. They were runner-up last year, would love to get back. And, of course, UNA not being there in a long time, Coach Wallace knows how to win. And finally getting this team back to the semifinals, and these players, they're going to be hungry for it. They look focused, especially after last week. Looking forward to seeing what happens. It's going to be a lot of fun.
No doubt about it, Mike. Great stuff there. And I got to give you some love, man. Of 3 of the 4 regions, you picked all the brackets perfectly. And last week, our one different pick was I had California, you had Shepherd. I looked up early. It was 17-7. California leading. I said, yeah, I got Mikey. I knew if I won that, steak dinner was mine, and Shepherd came all the way back. So now we're back to even all season. It's crazy how it's balanced out that we are literally even on our picks for the year. We've got 3 games left to pick, 2 this week, and then obviously 1 next week. But let's go ahead and dive in now and talk about this UNA Shepherd game. I want to start with Shepherd quarterback Jeff Ziemba. He was a Harlan Hill finalist last year, and he certainly has an excellent chance to take home the trophy this year. If he does, I'll have a chance to meet him as the banquet is held here at the University of North Alabama here in Florence, Alabama. And so, if he is the one that wins it, then I'll have a chance. And he certainly has done a lot to put himself in that conversation, Mike. When you look at some of his stats, he's, for the year passing, 3,515 yards passing, 31 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. His completion percentage is over 67%. Obviously a great passer, but he shows versatility in the run game. He's their third leading rusher, 80 carries, 267 yards. And just trying to do the math off the top of my head there, that's not mind-blowing numbers, about a little under 3, about 3.4 a carry. But he's also got 5 touchdowns, so he shows he's a dual threat. And if you consistently look at what they've done through the playoffs, Mike, they could score points. In their opener, they beat Assumption 48-31. Their second round, they beat LIU Post 40-21, and then they beat California 41-30. So all 3 playoff games, Mike, they've been in the 40s. That's certainly impressive. Now, they're going to face the best defense they face when they see UNA this week, but certainly UNA is going to face one of the best offenses they've had to face as well.
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned the 3 scores that Shepherd had, 40, 40, and 41. That's pretty impressive.
48.
Oh, it's 48 in the first game?
Yeah.
And they're averaging 40 points a game. So they've been doing it all year long. This is an offensive-minded team. They know how to put up points. Ziemba's been their leader. He's an experienced quarterback. He's been in the program a long time. And, it seems like he's the nucleus of their offense. Everything runs through him as the quarterback. But he also has some talent around him, has some talented receivers who can make some catches. So I think that's going to help them. Their offensive line seems to be pretty good as well when you look at them on film. So, let's see how they do, But like you said, and I agree with your point wholeheartedly, I think this will be the best defense they see up to this point. So, and with that in mind, I called Jacob Tucker after the game, after North Greenville, just to talk to him a little bit, get his thoughts. I'm like, what do you think about playing Ziemba? He's a Harlan Hill guy. He was the only returning finalist from last year's group. So he's a, second year in a row, he's going to be a finalist, and now you're a finalist. So kind of a cool showdown, right? And he's like, yeah, Mike, I hadn't thought about it too much, but I will say this. He's a really talented player. But so is our defense. Our defense is very talented. So I was like, well, you got a great point there. And let's just see what happens. And, I think we talked about it on your morning show yesterday. It's not really the quarterbacks facing off against each other. It's more of the quarterbacks versus their other team's defense. So, we'll see who does better against what defense. I think UNA has slightly better numbers defensively than Shepherd. I think UNA has I think they have one of the better scoring defenses left. They're either second or first in that category out of the 4 remaining teams. So, that helps them out. Shepherd not too far behind them, though. But I think North Alabama's defense gives them the advantage. Special teams, too. I think special teams, UNA's very much improved this year. Probably one of the best special teams in the nation as well. Turnover margin's going to help UNA as well. UNA by far the best turnover margin team out of the 4. But I think that's really the only categories they lead in. But back to Shepherd. I think offensively they're going to be tough to slow down. But, it depends on who controls the game. Is it going to be a high-scoring affair, or is it going to be something where UNA's defense kind of slows them down a little bit and does enough to win?
Yeah, great stuff, Mike. And we did talk about that some earlier in the week, and you're right. We love these quarterback showdowns. But I remember, you just think about, you remember all the great Peyton Manning, Tom Brady showdowns over the years?
Right.
But what you had to realize was Tom Brady wasn't defending Peyton Manning, and Peyton Manning wasn't defending Tom Brady. The defenses have to defend the quarterbacks, and I think offensively we have 2 really good football teams. I haven't seen Shepherd a lot. I've read stats. I've looked at some video, and they're really good. I like the Ziemba kid a whole lot, Mike. I think he can really, really make some special plays for them, and they also can run the ball. They're very balanced, and that's one thing they may have a slight advantage over us is that I feel like Jacob runs the ball very well, but sometimes our running backs haven't been very good. Most of our rushing comes from our quarterback, where you look at their guys, and they've got a 1,156-yard rusher, and Brandon Havlicek, or I don't know how to say his name. I'm trying to get the exact read on that. Havlik. You know what?
I'm going to go with Havlik. I think
said Havlicek. I'm thinking about the 1960s Boston Celtics over here.
There you go.
What world are you living in this morning, Matt? All right. Excuse me. So Havlik, but nonetheless, that's less important. What is important is that you're talking about a 5.9 yards per carry, 1,156 yards. They also have another guy in Glover that averages, 4.7 yards a pop and has over 600 yards on the season. So between these two guys, you're talking nearly 1,800 yards. You throw in Jeff Ziemba and his 200-plus, that's 3,000 yards. I mean, just short of 3,000 yards. When you look at UNA, it's really been the Jacob Tucker show when it comes to running the football. Jacob's the leading rusher on the year with 980 yards, and our number 2 guy, Damon Cox, has 488, and Ray Beasley has 408. So, combined, they're right under 900. And so I will give them an advantage with more balance in their offense. Passing is a little bit of a wash here. Jacob's been outstanding. He's thrown for 2,483 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 10 picks, whereas Ziemba's thrown for more, and he's been more efficient touchdown interceptions. I do believe Jacobs went against better defensive competition than what Jeff Ziemba's went against, or maybe his numbers maybe even be a little more comparable there as far as the passing numbers. Obviously, Jacobs' running ability is a huge thumbs up for him and for our offense. But if we're going to say offenses are even, or even maybe give Shepherd an edge, and maybe they deserve a slight edge there, at least certainly by the numbers they have an edge, and I like their balance. I really like their balance. I think defensively is where it really shifts gears, and I think UNA's got a major defensive advantage. So I'll say offenses are good, but Shepherd's gives them a little edge. Defenses, huge edge to UNA. If you look at what they've done against really good competition this year, I mean, only Jacksonville State really had their way. West Georgia had some success, but West Alabama put up a lot of numbers through the years. We held them to 7 points. Valdosta State had a lot of, big numbers. We held them to 19 points. I mean, every team we played, 7 points, nothing. You look in the playoffs, Pembroke 17, 7 of those were a defensive touchdown, so we held them to 10 points. Greenville was unable to score against us. Where you look at Shepherd, and I'm sure they played good offenses, but even though they've scored a bunch of points, Mikey, they've also given up a ton. They gave up 31, 21, and 30. So they give up a lot more. And ultimately, that's what it's going to come down to. Who can make more stops? I think that for UNA's defense, they're going to see a tougher offense this week than they've seen all season, unless you go all the way back to Jacksonville State in the opener. Right. So they're going to yield some yards and some points that they haven't yielded in some of the other games. But I think for Shepherd, their defense is not going to be as good, and they're going to see a very physical offense in UNA, and I think UNA is going to be able to score a few more points, and ultimately that's why I think UNA is going to win this game, is because I think their defense is so strong that they will be able to get some stops, where I think Shepherd's defense may not be able to get near as many stops. But I really think Shepherd's a good team, and I think they got a real chance. If this game was at Brawley, I would really, really be rah-rah in UNA thinking this could be, I wouldn't say a cakewalk, but a strong chance of victory. One of the big factors here is the weather. Mother Nature can always play her hand, and there's the high of about 34 degrees. I think kickoff set in the 20s. Listen, it gets cold in Florence, Alabama. It doesn't get that cold that often. It doesn't, and usually when it does, it's late at night. You're not playing a football game. I think they could probably adapt to the conditions better than we can. But as UNA head football coach Bobby Wallace said, this team is ready to play all the time, anytime. I think they're very hungry. And while Shepherd's had a great year, I think their great year does come to a stop this weekend. I like UNA to get the win.
Yeah, that's a pretty good assessment, Matt. I agree with a lot of what you said there, especially about the defense. Probably going to be the toughest challenge Shepherd's seen all year, probably by far. I think UNA's defense is that strong. And even for UNA's offensively, on defense, I think this will be one of the better offenses they've seen all year as well. Shepherd, pretty good offense. But that's what happens when you get in the semifinals. Don't want to get too caught up in stats because, the game is going to be played on the field. I think the weather does have an effect there. You mentioned that. I heard it's going to be sunny and 34, but when you say sunny and 34, it's not going to be too warm out there. It's going to be pretty cold. So going to be really close to below freezing, but it's not below freezing, thank goodness. Hopefully it doesn't get that low, especially if I'm there. But, we'll see if that has an effect. Like you said, Shepherd, they've already gotten used to it. But, at the same time, some of the North teams, they may come down here and think, well, 70's really hot, so. You can make that point too. But
well, yeah, and I would if that was the game, because exactly. I think it can affect you.
Right, absolutely. So let's see how much that affects you, and going to West Virginia and having to play in the elements. That's one thing that a lot of people are concerned about.
I think that could be the great equalizer. I think
It
if
could.
Shepherd's to win, it's because that really affected UNA. Because I think all things being even, UNA wins the game.
So, like, if you play this on a neutral field, I think me and you would both agree UNA is probably the favorite.
Yeah, I'd say. And they may even be the favorite on the road. I think they still would be the favorite, but I think they go from a 10-point neutral site favorite to a 3-point. If
There
I'm
you
just
go.
throwing hypothetical spreads out there on the road, because I think they're that good. I think they're that athletic. And
Yeah.
and I've seen just some clips of Shepherd, and they don't seem to pose quite the athletes UNA does. That UNA's defense, they get after you. I mean, to shut Greenville down the way they did, they're good.
Yeah, and that's about what I agree with right there. I think I think UNA has the better athletes. I think they're going to be the favorite regardless, just maybe not as much being on the road. I think that's going to help Shepherd being at home. But I still like UNA to win the game too. I think it's going to be pretty close. If I had to put a score on it, I'm going to say 24-17. I think defense plays a huge part in why UNA wins. I think not just slowing them down, but also at the same time scoring points themselves and putting the offense in a great position to do that. With turnovers, which UNA is so good at forcing turnovers, and I think that's going to be a big part of it as well. Filbert Marshall, that's one guy I really want to single out, a guy that may not be 100%. We don't really know. Coach Wallace said he didn't really know. Filbert really is the only one that knows that. But Filbert certainly played like he was 100% because he had 2 interceptions in the game. So
Yeah,
you got to be impressed.
I'll
with him.
take Filbert at 50% over most guys at 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to agree with you there. And, for Coach Wallace to say Filbert Marshall is one of the 3 best players he's ever coached in his career, that's pretty big.
Yeah, that's also, and just to follow that point, Mike, Coach Wallace, he's known for his greatness in Division II. He was a head coach at Division I for 9 years, and he also was an assistant coach in Division I for many years. So he's been around a lot of big-time players in his time, and for him to say that, certainly big. You say 24-17. I say 28-13. I think it's close. I think UNA pulls away late. I think they hold them to a couple field goals on some early drives. They play bend but don't break defense. They've done that all year. I think they do it again. UNA gets it rolling. Dre Hall's going to be a tough matchup on the outside for any of Shepherd's defensive backs. I think he makes a few plays. Jacob's going to be the steady, consistent player that he is, and that's going to be enough for UNA to win. It's going to be a great football game, and even though I won't make the trip to West Virginia, I don't have I'm done with my SEC Saturday shows for the year, so I will have that thing streaming, man. I will be locked in with probably a Miller Lite and some popcorn, man, at 11 o'clock. I'll get an early start that day.
Yeah, I hear you there, Matt. And I'm glad you're going to be able to stream it. I'm still got to figure out if I'm going to be able to go or not. I know UNA has basketball that weekend, so I may be there. I don't know what my assignment will be yet. Hopefully, I will be in West Virginia at the game. I would enjoy being there. The football team's done so well. I haven't missed a game in 5 years, so that'd be cool. Cool with me, and it will be cool up there.
Big time.
Yeah, so big game. And you had a good assessment there. I think a big difference in this game, and I mentioned it once already, but I think turnovers are going to be the difference. I think if UNA forces turnovers, they win a little bit bigger. I think if Shepherd protects the ball a little better, I think Shepherd has a really good chance to try to pull what some would believe is the upset.
Sure, and listen, I mean, I think this is the more even of the matchups in the semifinals, without a doubt. But I tell you, Mike, I hope you get to go. I know it'd be a great trip for you. I know how much you want to be there, and then we're in that situation the following week where hopefully we're all going to see UNA play, because I will admit at this point, total bias towards my university. But we've all decided we're going anyway.
Yeah, we're going to Kansas City, that's for sure.
We're going to go. We're going to go enjoy it because even if UNA doesn't win, it'll be a great season. And I'll tell you, when you look at a team like Shepherd, who they were in the semifinals, I know in 2013 and came up short. Then they were in the finals in 2015. It came up short, and they're back in the semifinals. A team that constantly is obviously putting their nose to the grindstone there and trying to work hard. If they were able to beat UNA, even though there may be disappointment for me at the time, I would genuinely be happy for a team that continue to try to overcome their obstacles. And that's a really good football team the Lions got to play this Saturday.
And, going back to us going to Kansas City, being a guy that went to every Division II game since 2000 when it was at Brawley Stadium and it was right in our backyard, I really enjoyed going to those games and watching the rise of Northwest Missouri State after losing 4 times in a row to finally get over the hump. You really started to root for Northwest every time they got there. I watched Grand Valley dominate throughout the 2000s, watching some other teams come in every now and then, some Gulf South Conference schools, Delta State, Valdosta State, and then Minnesota Duluth winning on a field goal. Some really good games as well. The Grand Valley game was so good. Been a lot of good games over the years, and for us to be able to go to Kansas City, I did miss the last 2 years, unfortunately, but for us to be able to go this year, regardless of the outcome of this week, it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, and, again, UNA biased there, it would be nice to see the university there. But at the same time, we're just such big fans of Division II football that if it's Shepherd, Ferris, Northwest, or North Alabama, we're going to be excited for it no matter what.
Absolutely, Mikey. Let's move on and let's take a look at the other semifinal matchup, and that's Ferris State and Northwest Missouri. And we both picked Ferris in the upset. We both kind of been right with this team. And the last 2 years, they had the Harlan Hill Trophy winner in Jason, every time. Jason von der Laan. I've only had him on my show. Only talked to the man and his family for an hour. Should think I'd remember his name. But either way, the guy's a great player, and he's gone now. And for them to be able to duplicate even better results as far as postseason, I think their regular season wasn't as good as last year, but their postseason's been better. And now they're into the semifinals with a win over Grand Valley, who knocked them out of the postseason last year. I got a chance to meet their head coach and their athletic director as they made the trip down for the Harlan Hill banquet, and great people. That's a great university up there, Ferris State, and they're in a position they've got to feel good about. They were very efficient last week, Mike. Even though they didn't really have a ton of yards, they were very efficient with what they had. Between their two quarterbacks, they were 13 of 17 passing for 190 yards. They didn't have any touchdowns. They did have one interception, but a high completion percentage there. You look at all the running backs, and it was just kind of a smorgasbord of running backs and quarterbacks. Their leading guy had 86 yards, Jahan Brown, and then quarterback had 51, and the other quarterback Bell had 49. So they just kind of balanced attack. Where you look at Grand Valley, and they really threw the ball really, really well. 23 of 40, 310, 3 touchdowns, no picks. But Ferris kept making the plays when they needed to, and they got a 47-32 win. So they'll move on and play Northwest Missouri. And, Mike, when you look at Northwest Missouri, oh, my goodness, this team, with all due respect to UNA and Shepherd and Ferris State, they are, in my opinion, the team to beat. They are the heavy favorites, and they deserve to be. Defending national champions, they bring back 16 of 22 starters. They won it in 2013 as well. There's some guys still left over from that team. And when you look at what they've done, it's really mind-blowing. Last week against Harding, who was an undefeated team and the number one rushing team in all of Division II football, 182 Division II football teams compete. And Northwest Missouri held this team to 119 yards on 43 carries. That's not even 3 yards an average. For the leading team rushing, throwing the ball, that was a lot worse. Park Parish was 0 for 6 with 2 picks. Your passer rating can't get much worse than that. And I'm not picking on Park Parish here. I'm just talking about the great defense of Northwest Missouri, just physically just stymieing that offense. And then you look at what they did offensively. Their starting quarterback, Zimmerman, who's also a Harlan Hill finalist, 340 yards passing, a nice completion percentage of about 70% there. He did have 1 pick, but he threw a touchdown. And then a running game, not great, but they had 57 yards. They didn't need to have that many with that passing game. But they're that air raid, quick pop passing attack, and they really showed their dominance over a good Harding team from a good Great American Conference. And to me, Ferris State's having a great year, and I'm not counting Ferris out. But, Mike, this week and next week and until this thing's over with, until Northwest Missouri beats them, I just can't pick against them.
And, Ferris State, got to go back to them. And, Marty Carter is another Harlan Hill candidate from Grand Valley State, and they held him to 101 yards. I think that's his lowest amount of yards all year. And he had 5.6 yards a carry still, but, Ferris State really slowed down Carter. It's going to be a little bit of a tougher challenge to try to slow down Northwest Missouri State. Bart Williams is a great player as well from Grand Valley, but now you got to deal with Kyle Zimmerman, Zimmerman threw for 30 completions, 42 attempts, and then over 300 yards. That's going to be what Northwest has done all year. The one game I go back to the most, and this is the game I've watched more than any, was when they played Pittsburgh State.
Northwest?
Yes, and Northwest completely and utterly dominated that game. And you know how good Pittsburgh State's been throughout the years. They've been at the national championship game a few times.
I watched them
they
beat
won.
Wayne State in 2011.
2011, that's right. Yeah, I remember that game as well. And, this team's been good. I don't think this was their best year. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs. I think they lost 3 or 4 games. But Northwest Missouri, I believe the score at halftime was like 42-3. I mean, it was just complete domination all the way around. And not only offensively, not only defensively, but also on special teams. They just made crazy plays. They had a SportsCenter #1 play on the top 10 of like 5 or 6 laterals on a special teams play before ending the half. This team is just that good. I mean, they're talented. I don't think any other team could even fathom doing that sometimes. You know, it's hard to wrap your head around what they've done all year. Statistically, they've been so good. And like you said, to beat the man, woo, you got to beat the man. To be the man, you got to beat the man. I said that wrong. I butchered it a little bit. Sorry about that. But this team is the man, so to speak, and this team is that good. And like you said, you don't count Ferris out completely, but the Massey poll did pick Northwest to be a 98% favorite for a reason. They're that good. Who can beat them? We'll see. I like Northwest in this game, and I'm going to say 38-17. I think it is a pretty dominant win, and I think they advance to the national championship. But, you know, again, games aren't played on paper, and, you know, if Northwest has an off day, Fair State has their best game, anything could happen.
Anything can happen. I think last week California was a pretty hefty favorite there over
Shepherd.
And Shepherd's still able to win that game. So, you know, you're right. You know, those are fun things. I love them. I mean, I'm always intrigued by metrics and ratings and numbers, but at the same time, you got to go out and you got to execute. That's what it comes down to. This Ferris State team's hungry, and I've kind of compared them a little bit to that mid-late 90s Tennessee team. You know, when Peyton Manning was great, and he was great, and he was great, and the team was great. They were always great. But they couldn't win the national championship. And then the year he graduates and T. Martin comes in, and T. was a good player. T. Martin was not Peyton Manning. But what do they do when T. Martin comes in? They win the national championship. Now, there's a lot of other moving pieces out there. Who's playing, you know, defense. And I remember Nash and Peerless Price, all those crazy guys going way back down memory lane. But this Ferris State reminds me a little bit of that team. Obviously, I'm looking at them from a distance. But you lose a great player, and you think, oh, boy. But then everybody else just looks around and says, hey, we were really good too. And by the way, Jason Vonderline will tell you how good his teammates were. He was a very selfless, humble young man, so he didn't think it was all him. As a matter of fact, he constantly deferred credit elsewhere. But this team's really stepped up with a new quarterback because, I mean, you rely on a guy like Jason so much. And to be in the position they are this year, it says a lot about their program, their coach, and just their athletic staff and department as a whole. So they're here for a reason. They're not going to lay down and die. But like I said earlier, Mike, Northwest Missouri is a team to me right now. I'm not picking against them until somebody can prove to me why I should. And if up to this point, nobody's proven me to why I should pick against Northwest Missouri. But this Ferris State team, I'm going to give them maybe a little better chance than you. I think the game's a little closer than we may expect. I'm going to say 31-24 in a competitive game. Ferris gives them a real fight. Northwest, too big, too strong, too good on both sides of the football, and they will represent, you know, themselves once again in the national championship game. And in Maryville, I just looked it up, Maryville, Missouri to Kansas City is about an hour and 30 minutes, about 95 miles. So, you know, it's kind of like for them when UNA was here, not quite the same, but similar. When UNA played the national championship and it was at Brawley Stadium, they were kind of in their backyard. Now, we didn't have to travel but 5 minutes. They'd have to travel about an hour and a half. But still, last year the attendance was over 16,000. I would assume about 15,000 of those people were probably Bearcat Nation. So if they are able to get back to the championship game next week, Mike, it's going to be a tough crowd for whoever has to play them if they are there.
Right, Matt. And again, you know, like you said, you can't count out Ferris yet. You got it a little closer than I do. I think Reggie Bell is a great quarterback to come in. And the T. Martin theory, as you like to allude to, you know, I agree with that. You know, I think you just can't put all the weight on a quarterback, and Vanderland always deferred credit. And I like that about him. And Reggie Bell's a good quarterback, a Division I transfer coming in and really helping out that team right away. And, you know, they also have some talented running backs, and their defense has been pretty good this year as well, but trying to slow down some teams. And they did enough to beat Grand Valley. And Grand Valley's a really good football team. So if they can beat Grand Valley, you know, I don't think you could count out their chances at all against Northwest Missouri State, but they are the creme de la creme. So I think that's what it comes down to for me. I expect Northwest to be back in Kansas City, but Ferris State is a good football team. Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens, indeed, Mike. And I want to say one last thing here. I really think, and we've said this from the beginning, and we may be right on, we both picked UNA and we both picked Northwest Missouri to be in the championship game from the time the bracket was released. And we're both obviously still picking them. They're both still alive in the semifinals, and I really feel like they're on a collision course. Now, Shepherd and Ferris, I'm sure they're going to have a lot to say about this week, but I really feel like that's the game we're going to get. I mean, it's more of a gut feeling, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, you're picking a close game over in Northwest Missouri, and I think you're picking a little closer game in Shepherd as well.
Well, you're picking
maybe I'm picking a little closer.
You're picking closer.
You're not picking as close in the Shepherd UNA
Yeah,
game.
but I think it will by my final tally, but I think it's going to be close. I think it'll be a competitive game in the second half. I'd like UNA to pull away a little bit late, but I don't think they'll just jump on them and dominate them.
And I think this week will say more than any other week will about how good a football team is, because you're playing teams that you haven't played before. I think we'll find out just absolutely how good each super region is, because each one of these teams represents their super region. And I think UNA will have the opportunity to prove that, hey, Super Region 2 in the Gulf South Conference isn't that weak.
I think it is. But I think, Mike, that you can be a great team in a weaker conference.
Well, that's true,
because
too.
I think the SEC this year is much weaker than it has been.
Right.
But I still think Alabama's some bad dudes.
I think UNA would like to prove that our dominance this year and the fact that we beat North Greenville 38-0, and that we beat these teams so big, they're a little tougher than you think.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can follow that. That just because our region hasn't been great, that doesn't mean that
maybe
we're not great.
Maybe not necessarily just proving that the region isn't weak, but proving that we're playing a bit tougher competition than you think.
I mean, I may have you halfway there with you. I just think at the end of the day, to me it's more of a just because we played in maybe a weaker region this year doesn't mean that we're weak.
Absolutely.
That's the way I would probably see that. But we're splitting hairs a little bit there, man. Anyways. Always a great time talking Division II football, and now that we're so deep, we go a little bit more in depth with the games. But I'll tell you, man, one thing that scares me about Northwest Missouri, and why I think they're the ultimate favorite here, they may have the best offense of the group, and they may have the best defense of the group. And when you may be the best at both, you're going to be hard to beat.
That's right. And, of course, it's all about showing up, and they've done it all year long. This is one team that seems like every given Saturday that they're ready to go on the field, they're focused and ready to play, and they've shown it all year. I don't think they've really had off games. And if they have had off games, show me where that's been. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I know UNA's defense will – I had Darius Wright on my morning show here at Fox Sports Shoals last week before the North Greenville game, and talking with him, he was an East Carolina transfer. I guarantee you, he'll take him and his defense over Northwest Missouri. Anybody, they're a very confident group, but we're hoping for that matchup, and we hope we get it. I think that's the one we want. But like I said, I'll be very happy for Ferris or for Shepherd, even though I'm a UNA fan, because certainly they've worked hard and they're here and they're going to fight to the finish and try to get themselves there. And if they do, the kudos to them. I'll be excited to go watch them next week too. But I'm admitting, I'm UNA Northwest is what I'm hoping for.
Well, yeah, and certainly I think what you can say is all four teams that are here right now definitely deserve to be here.
Yeah, they wouldn't be if they were not. They wouldn't deserve it if they wasn't here, Mikey.
That's right, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing to look at.
All right, well, that's going to be it for us. I want to thank our producer, Will Corey, as always, behind the scenes there. Mike always brings it. You got the big-time knowledge there and been picking these games left and right, man, getting them all right. Pretty impressive to do that.
It's been luck.
I don't know about that, man. You study that stuff. Always thank you for tuning in with us and hanging out with us as we try to bring you great coverage of Division II football. We'll see you next week for our final week, Championship Week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Gulf South Conference Football Weekly Podcast. Tune in next week for more GSC recaps, analysis, and predictions from your hosts, Matt Selesky and Mike Ezekiel.